Hey, so today what we're going to do is go through our substance abuse education. One note, this is from the coach's perspective. This would not be shared with athletes, this exact presentation. So there may be some conversations, some examples, maybe some instructional cues that we may talk about in this, where a coach could watch and add that to the presentation, but the athletes wouldn't see it. This is to be delivered in person by a coach with the use of this PowerPoint. So let's kind of get to this. Let's share. Go ahead and share this screen. Share. Okay, so today what we're going to kind of go through is our substance abuse education program. This is to be used with student athletes in a team talk setting. It could be in a meeting. It could be following a training session or practice. But basically, you need to have the ability as a coach, as you're delivering this, to use different personalities. You know, am I in a weight room where it's going to be tough for everybody to focus in and lock in? You know, if so, you need to have great examples. You may need to move around a little bit. You may need to break this up into a couple different pieces. Same thing with practice if you're doing it on the field. Are you going to be doing it without the slide pack? If so, you really need to have even better examples. You can certainly take this, adjust it to meet your needs, but this is just the kind of the bare bones content that we can kind of go through. Hey, if you were in a lesson or like a team meeting, you know, this may be a little bit better. You can deliver it in one pack. So this may also go along with some information. Let's say we could attach information regarding drug testing, whether it's NCAA, departmental, or university setting, but this may be an example for there. Okay, let's get started. So the beginning, we want to root everything in choice. We talk about choice all the time. We talk about being a good person. The person I am will determine the athlete that I will become. The team that we are and the people that we are within the team will determine the team that we will become on the field. So we want to keep that in mind. Basically, everything, too, is about choice. So choice and free will is the most powerful thing we as humans have. You know, animals in the world, they don't have that. They have the choice on whether they're going to run after something and try to eat it or not, but that's kind of ingrained in them. We have the choice on what we become, what we do with our lives, how we spend our free time, who we date, who we marry, what we name our kids. We have the power of choice, and that is really, really impactful. Okay, so as we go through there, one of the things we can kind of talk about is this idea of risk versus reward. Because we do have choice, we need to be able to weigh what is the risk reward of me making choice and understand that there's consequences to every decision. Right or wrong, there's consequences. If I make a bad decision, the consequence will be me getting in trouble. Okay? If I make the right decision, the consequence may be I don't get to go have fun. There's consequences with everything, regardless of what you choose. You need to keep that in mind. And what we're trying to do is basically just balance that. Okay, so choice is basically choosing or selecting one or the other. One or the other, I get to go, and the other one, I don't get to go. So the cool thing, too, that you may be able to add is, we're super blessed to be in the Western world, in a country that allows us to have free will and choice. And we can choose to do anything we want. We just can't do everything. That's an important, and that's a powerful kind of concept to understand, is we can absolutely attack anything. We can go do anything. If I want to be a physician, go. But I can't be a physician and a marine biologist in Antarctica, or I can't be a coal miner and a marine biologist. The coal mines are up in the mountains, and marine biologists, last time I checked, are in the oceans. You can do anything you want. You just can't do everything. Okay. So the same thing, kind of going back to choice, there's going to be short and long term things. Okay. So especially as I make a choice, there's going to be a consequence in the short term, and there's going to be a long term. And what we're going to try to do, and there's an example later on in this slide deck, we want to try to accumulate the most amount of successes over a time span as we can. Okay, so if I win today and I win tomorrow and the next day, I'm accumulating success. If I make a great choice today, I make a great choice tomorrow, and continue on down the way, I'm stacking up ones is what we'll call it as opposed to zeros. I'm stacking up wins over time, and that's what I want to do. I'm going to really stack up positive choices. Talked about this again. You can go back. The person I am will determine the athlete I will become. And also in all these slides, as we go through, you'll see a common trend is the dice. Okay, so as you go through as a coach and you're kind of finding your flow as a presenter, you can always use the dice example. Are you going to roll the dice? Okay, you can roll the dice and have a great outcome. You can roll the dice and lose everything. So as you're kind of going through, if you lose your train of thought, go back to the dice, and that'll kind of help you. It's just like a little instructional strategy for us, and it'll follow this entire slide pack. Okay, so risk management. Let's talk about gambling a little bit. Let's go to Vegas. I sit down at the table, I put my money down, and I had the ability to double up. Okay, so let's say I hit it big, and I went from $500 on the table. Now I got $1,000. Man, we're so excited. Okay, we won. We got such a rush from winning, and that feels good. But the thing about success is it's oftentimes fleeting. Experiences are also fleeting. So now let's say I'm like, man, I got to have that rush again. So I'm going to double down. Let's hit it again. I rolled the dice back down. I'm back at zero. I lost everything. Okay. So that's kind of how drugs are. That's how any substance is, especially if I get behind a wheel. So let's say I go out with some people, and man, I'm fine. I can drive home. Now there's a risk reward there. Okay. The risk is I may endanger somebody else. I may endanger myself. The reward, maybe I just get to go home that night. Okay. But it's not a great risk to reward ratio there. The greatest opportunity there is for me to take no risk and not drive, or even step back, manage how I use alcohol, or do not use substance at all. Okay? Another example that you may use is the idea of climbing a mountain. Let's say we are big outdoors people, and let's say I want to climb Mount Everest. Okay, so I'm going to climb Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. It's 27,000 some odd feet in the air. Okay, it's unbelievable. It has very little oxygen up there. It's a really nasty place. The reward of me getting up there is I'm one of less than 1,000 people in the history of the world that's ever climbed Mount Everest. Okay, the risk is I may get snow blindness. I may lose a hand. I may not even come back. Okay, what is that in my whole grand scheme of everything? Do I value going up there more so than I do the risk of me losing a hand? That's something I have to choose. Free will. Everything's about choice. Everything's there. Okay, and depending on the activity, there's going to be a certain degree of risk reward there that I need to manage. I need to keep that in mind. Okay. As an athlete, we talked about we want to stack up ones. Here's a Rubik's Cube. We have ones on them. Okay, every single day you either get a 1 or a 0. A 1 means you did everything right. You made positive choices, and we move forward 1%. The 0 means you did not. Okay, so let's say I stack up all these ones, starting on the top left corner, and then the red, then the white, then the yellow, then the green, and another red. And then I decide to use a chemical substance. I use something on the outside, and then basically all my ones, all the foundation of my ones start to ooze away. Okay, so this is kind of how drugs act on us. We stack up, and it may not even be seen on the top. So like up at the top, the top ones, you really can't even tell that they're impacted. But the foundation, everything is starting to ooze away. And that's all about choice and using substances. So drugs, okay, a drug is any chemical substance that when inhaled, injected, smoked, consumed, absorbed, and dissolved, will cause physiological and or psychological changes inside the body. So it's going to change the normal function of the body. So drugs can be administered a lot of different ways. You can inhale them, smoke them. Okay? You can inject it. You can snort it through the nose. You can take it orally in the form of a pill or liquid. You can take it rectally through the behind or the colon. Okay. You can diffuse it through blood under the tissues of the tongue by putting something under your tongue, and it diffuses under there and gets into your bloodstream. Okay. Or you can take it topically. Different types of uses of drugs. You know, drugs and different substances go back to the beginning of time. Okay? If you look at old writings, people were smoking different things, they were drinking certain things, but substances have been around for a long, long time. A lot of those things are for spiritual or religious reasons. Okay. Also, early medicine experimented with a lot of different types of substances. Sometimes they knew what they were trying to do, sometimes they didn't. But using plants, herbs, and different types of alcohol, these different early medicine opportunities were trying to take with the early physicians to cure people and to get the evil out of people. Okay. Other different reasons would be for designer of smart drugs. A smart drug is basically something that claims to improve cognition. So something that may improve alertness or memory, may be used for, let's say, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease or maybe ADHD. Okay? So that may be an example there. Examples of that could be Adderall for people that struggle with focus, CBD oil, with or without the THC. Things like that may be considered a smart drug or a designer drug. And the last category is a recreational drug, and basically that's taken for trying to alter conscious thought. Okay, so I'm really trying to most likely improve my perceptions and feelings and make positive feelings. Okay, but it alters my mind state chemically. Most common types of drugs are listed here. We're going to go through here quickly, but we want to think about these drugs, and the different types of drugs are going to depend largely on the socioeconomic or SES status of the people that they're around, and maybe the culture or area of the people that you're around. So people in different areas of city may use different things. People that know different things or come from different backgrounds or experiences in their past may use different things, or maybe just be more knowledgeable about certain things. Geographical setting and opportunity also come into play. So things such as marijuana that are a plant-based and grow better in warmer weather, you may actually have either more concentrated strands or just a higher prevalence of having marijuana in southern states or near a border where it's easy to get across. Okay. So here, drugs really impact a lot of different things. One, with the cerebral cortex, okay, so which that really controls activity and things in the mind, such as judgment, and memory, and reasoning. Drugs interact here. They could be things like barbiturates, opiates, alcohol, and basically they're just changing the cellular activity within that area of the brain. Other areas that impact very similar, but just changing the chemical components and cellular activity in that area are the thalamus. That is the relay center of the brain, where you're going to have a lot of signals coming in and out. Okay, depression is a major part here, and your hypothalamus. Okay, hypothalamus is responsible largely for regulating body temperature, fat, and carbohydrate metabolism, your water balance, feelings of hunger and satiety, and even pleasure and pain. Amphetamines and stimulants really target this area of the brain. Your limbic system. Limbic system is really involved in memory and emotions, and you can really, any drugs that impact the limbic system, you can have major shifts in anger, joy, remorse, and they can be very drastic. You may go from joy to like remorse and hate really fast. But basically the biggest thing here is the normal processes within the body, they're still happening. When the drugs come in, they accelerate or slow down the activities. It's important here too, you can see kind of the drugs in this slide is represented by the green structures and the green ooze, but the dice are still there too. Okay, so we roll the dice. How are they going to impact what is happening? Okay. So drugs that impact neurons and things within sending messages across neurons throughout the body really play havoc on what we call neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are like chemical messengers that cross the synaptic cleft. We have neurons that go all over our body, and they're carrying messages. It may be a thought, it may be a memory, it may be an action potential to cause a muscular contraction. Okay, but they don't connect. Neurons exist with a small space in between called the synaptic cleft. And in order for the message to continue running downstream, they utilize chemical messengers, the yellow globules here, in the form of a neurotransmitter. An example of a neurotransmitter may be acetylcholine. Acetylcholine crosses the synaptic cleft of different neurons and goes into muscle tissue and causes the muscle to become excited and contract. Okay. Drugs are represented here by the green, gnarly little nuclear signs. They basically invade this area and change, alter, maybe speed up or slow down the message that's sent through the synaptic cleft. Okay, so this action potential that did exist will either get really accelerated and the message will be sped up, or maybe overcompensated for by severe reaction on the other side, or it can be slowed down, dampened, or shunted altogether. Okay? So the idea of neurotransmitters and chemical messengers, that's a major, major site in which drugs really attack us. Okay, so now when we think about what kind of drugs are most common, so for us, we're in Central Texas. Okay, we are in a city that has an interstate that runs right through our campus, literally right through our campus, with millions of cars each week coming by. Okay, so the likelihood of there being drugs of all kinds of categories in this city is pretty high. Okay, so we're not going to really talk on every single one of them. We're going to group them into a couple groups and then touch base briefly, but we will start with a stimulant. A stimulant is any substance that temporarily raises levels of physiological or nervous activity anywhere in the body. Okay? So examples here may be cocaine, nicotine, amphetamines, even caffeine. Okay? Some short-term effects, you're going to potentially have a small period of euphoria. Okay, so I feel really great. I may have an improved attention span temporarily. I may have really higher sense of self-esteem. I may actually have a suppressed appetite here too. Okay, so the short-term effect, especially if I'm dealing with an athlete, we can't have intense changes in personality when we preach consistency. We can't have suppressed appetite on athletes where we're trying to manage and maintain body weight. Other side effects of these different types of stimulants could be an increased heart rate. Anything that's like sympathetic in nature, it's really ramping up and attacking the sympathetic nervous system, which means gas pedal, right? So we're increasing heart rate, heightened blood pressure, high body temperature. It's going to rise rapidly. Muscles may shake. They may be aggravated over time, and I may just have a very overall sense of irritability. With long-term use, you may have extreme weight loss. You may have reduced sexual functioning, especially in older people. You may have gastrointestinal problems, and over time, because of the blockage of nutrients that occurs from the stimulant use, you may actually have muscle deterioration, bone deterioration. You may actually have major issues with stroke, seizure, and then dependency is all there. So some other examples that I did not mention would be like Adderall, Ritalin, synthetic marijuana, and ecstasy. And here's a great thing too, and we're in college environment. You can bring up what's the most common stimulant that's everywhere, and it may be coffee and the caffeine that's in the coffee. If you're around athletes that use energy drinks, great opportunity to kind of talk about the negative effects there, especially if you're in a weight management sport, if you're in a sport that tests for different types of stimulants like that, but definitely a great opportunity. Okay, so we talked cocaine a second ago, but cocaine is an example of stimulant. A major short-term side effects with this, or like I mentioned with all stimulants, it would be gas pedal. Like, let's go right now. An increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, irritability, and anxiety. You may actually have sudden death as well, because everything is happening right now. It's ramping up the body so much, it's causing that fight or flight mechanism, and my body is just burning on everything right now. And that can really play havoc on the cardiac and respiratory systems. Okay, some long-term effects with this use: you may have chronic or extreme fatigue when not using. you can have cardiac arrest, stroke, and then increased likelihood of death. And let's not also forget that with risk and reward, I should have said this earlier, with risk and reward, the situations I find myself in that are more risky will put me at a higher likelihood of being in even more risky situations. The more risky people I run around with increases the likelihood that I'm going to meet and interact with other risky people. Okay, so the more things that I get into, and it kind of goes into the gateway drug theory here in just a minute we'll talk about, but the more risky situations I find myself in, the likelihood of me finding myself in some more risky situations goes up exponentially. Okay, another stimulant. Let's talk about nicotine a little bit. We think about nicotine with smoking, cigarettes, cigars, smokeless tobacco, such as chewing tobacco, dip, plug tobacco, which is old. People don't really do that very often. But the new one would be vaping. Okay, so anything with nicotine, you're going to really increase, regardless of whether it has smoke or not, you're going to increase your probability of any form of cancer of the esophagus or the respiratory system, anywhere upper respiratory. Your likelihood of having cancer is going to go through the roof. That also brings up an increased likelihood of death. Okay, so if we do add smoking to that, you're going to have chemicals, you're going to have tar, you're going to have nasty issues going down your trachea, your esophagus. Smokeless tobacco is going to be the same way. Okay. Along with that, you're going to have issues with dental problems. You're going to have really problems with addiction and trying to get away from that. And let's not forget that it's nasty, right? So like as we're around people that are smoking, that are dipping, that are chewing tobacco, it's somewhat appalling. It's not socially accepted anymore in 2019. All right, so thinking about vaping. Vaping is the new thing that everybody's like, oh, let's vape, right? There's no smoke, it's just water vapor and some nicotine. Well, what we don't really think about is the chemicals that's also in that. Where also are we getting the content packets, the little cartridges that have the nicotine in it? What are in those? And we don't really know. Those chemicals, along with the nicotine, can be extremely damaging to my body. The nicotine can be really, really addictive over time. But with vaping, I see increased airway resistance, so the lack of the ability to move oxygen and carbon dioxide through efficiently. Okay? If I can't do that, I cannot remove waste from my body and exhale it. I cannot bring good oxygen in and use the oxygen to buffer my hydrogen ions that I produce through muscular contraction. Okay, so anything that I bring into my body in the form of vapor or smoke will dramatically reduce my endurance and ability to produce forceful contractions over time. So things that rely on a long day or a long event, if I'm smoking, that's taking my performance down, regardless if it's a smoke that has tar. Okay. With vaping too, I'm going to have chronic coughing, increased heart rate, and increased blood pressure. Okay. And nicotine withdrawal. Okay. Let's say I decide to get away from nicotine. Okay? I can have an extreme feeling of being alone, down, or sad. I can have problems sleeping. I can be irritable. Okay? This is very similar to the side effects that occur with cocaine withdrawal. Okay. I can actually have a slower heart rate when I get off of it because I don't have that stimulant effect. And then I can actually feel more hungry. Let's move to depressant here a little bit. Okay, so a depressant is anything where if a stimulant ramps me up, a depressant is parasympathetic and it brings me back down. Some short-term effects, just largely speaking with depressants, I'm going to slow brain functioning. Pulse and breathing may slow. Blood pressure will reduce. Okay. With that also, I may have other areas of my body operating at a suboptimal level. So I may have slurred speech. I may be dizzy because I lose vestibular control. Okay, I may have visual disturbances where my overall vision becomes blurry or even jumpy. I will have dilated pupils, and then the likelihood of me being addicted to this can be very, very high as well. Long-term effects, you can think about high blood pressure, okay, tolerance, to higher levels of depressants. So going back to the gateway thing, I need to move that up a little bit and to talk to it a little bit more. But the idea of a gateway, hey, the more tolerance I have for one thing will lead to tolerance for other things as well. Let's say I'm a baseball guy, a pitcher, or let's say I'm a sprinter. Let's say I'm a sprinter because we all run. Okay, so if I have no tolerance to sprinting and I go out and run a 100-meter dash, the likelihood of me popping a hammy is high because it's a spike. It's a spike and it goes over my readiness level. However, if I sprint over time and I build up, now if I have a spike, I'm not really at risk. Same thing here. If I have a tolerance for a drug, for a depressant here, and then I move to another depressant, it may not affect me at first, okay? But what'll get me is the long-term effect of that toxin inside my body. Okay? Some examples of depressants, obviously number one is alcohol. It's everywhere. Xanax, Valium. And when we're thinking about alcohol, so alcohol is probably your most common drug. It's everywhere. You go to the gas station, you go to the liquor store, the grocery store, alcohol is there. You watch NASCAR race, you watch a baseball game, alcohol is there. It's always everywhere. Okay, so it's a fine line. Okay, not only is it everywhere, it's socially accepted by, regardless of the background of the people. You know, it's going to be in politics. It can be in an event. It can be in a wedding. So a lot of these things, it's a slippery slope on how we do it. Let's look at performance. Okay, so some negative effects with that is really going to impair my ability to recover. It's going to change the way I make decisions, and it's going to decrease my overall readiness and ability to make very dexterous, quality movements over time. Even if I'm not under the influence of alcohol, it can slow down my ability for my body to function smoothly. Okay. And it really changes social interactions. Okay, so an example here, stole this from one of our visitors that came in from the military a while back, but they always talked about how severe alcohol's impact is on people, that there used to be a saying for pilots in the military, 12 hours between bottle to throttle. Now they've pushed it back 24 hours bottle to throttle. So if I have a mission at 6 p.m. tonight, I could not have had anything after 6 p.m. yesterday. And that's not because I'm still going to be intoxicated or under the influence of alcohol. That means that the slowed perception speed, the slow everything throughout my body from the day before is still in me. Okay, so it really impacts me much, much more so than just in the now when it's in my system. Here's some other short and long-term effects. I'm not going to kind of go through all of this. You can really spend time looking at really what makes up a drink. Okay, so if you look at what a drink is, it depends on the form. Okay, so a beer and a shot will be drastically different. If you look at the volume, a beer is typically 12 or 16 ounces, whereas a shot may be a small little, maybe 1.5, 2.5 fluid ounce deal. They may actually have the same alcohol content within it with different volumes. We need to look at, what are we drinking? Okay, how often are we drinking these as well? And this may be a great opportunity too, if questions arise on how we can. So we talked about how alcohol is socially accepted and it's used in a lot of different areas. How can we actually trick the system to be accepted? Okay, so let's say I'm at a wedding and they're like, oh, have a beer. You're like, oh, but I don't want to be that loser that's just standing here, right? So can we teach strategies to hold a beer and then just like pour it out slowly where I'm not even drinking it? I don't know. And this is kind of the taboo thing to kind of think about. But if these things come up, have some conversation points on how you may manage that, because they've certainly come up in the past here recently. Okay. What is binge drinking? Binge drinking is basically consuming large amounts of alcohol over time, typically 4 or 5 drinks at a time. Okay, for men, binge drinking is 5 or more drinks in 2 hours or less. And for women, it's 4 or more drinks in 2 hours or less. Okay, so we want to think about too, there's some facts in the notes section here too, but we want to think about what is an alcohol problem? What does it mean for me to be abusing alcohol? One study has said that if you have repeat days in a week where you consume 3 or more drinks, you may then actually be using alcohol incorrectly, okay? Or more so than just being a social drinker. On the opposite hand, if you binge drink more than 2 to 3 times per month, meaning I go over 5 drinks for a man or 4 drinks from a woman, you may be using alcohol much, much more so than to be just considered a social drinker. So some things that we can kind of think about here, okay? Also, college, binge drinking is very common. It's also common the younger you are. Younger generations that are looking, especially people that are below the age of 21, okay? Often binge drink much, much more because they're looking not for the social interaction, they're looking for the change, the altered perception that the alcohol does as a drug. Okay? It's also important to note here that there is an age on this, and we need to make sure that we're very clear in saying 21 is 21. If you're not 21, it is illegal for you. It's not just bad, it is illegal for you to consume alcohol. So that needs to be said as well. Moving into marijuana. Okay, so THC. THC is the chemical in marijuana that causes the psychoactive impacts within the body and causes the issues to occur. Okay, so cannabis is the actual name for everything is occurring. And cannabis is the psychoactive dried buds and leaves of a female hemp plant that contains THC. THC basically can be taken in by smoking something. It can be taken in by eating something. It can be with orally with like oils. Okay, so basically THC, when taken into the body, especially when smoked, impacts the body very, very rapidly. Okay, so THC causes an extreme sense of euphoria and relaxation for most people. For people that don't experience this sense of relaxation, they may actually feel a sense of paranoia, like somebody is watching them, and it can be a very, very interesting kind of completely opposite of what is normally socially thought of for marijuana. Okay, so again, going back to the gateway concept, if I've never been around this, I've never done it, and then I find myself in a risky situation, and then it's like I may be under the influence of another drug, and then now I try to use this, how do I know what it's going to do to me? I know what's socially accepted, what says, oh, you're going to relax, but what if I'm not that person? What if I'm the person that is extremely paranoid or, does something silly that I'm not under control? Okay, so how does marijuana work? THC is the chemical. So THC is very similar to another chemical inside the brain. It's called anandamide. And I may have slaughtered that name. It's in the notes. Anandamide is the way it's spelled. Okay, so I would probably not say that. I would just kind of go in and talk about and say THC is very similar to another brain chemical. And because of that, the brain recognizes the THC and then really allows that to impact the processes that's going on extremely rapidly. That's why when inhaled or taken inside the body, it happens so fast because it's so similar to the other type of brain chemical, anandamide, that it really uptakes it very, very fast. Okay? So some things that THC can negatively impact listed on the screen: overall sensory perception, emotions, motor control. It's basically going to slow everything down. It's going to distort a lot of things, and it's really going to impair my body in order to do something. Okay, going back to what we talked about with tobacco. Okay, anything, it does not matter if it's tobacco, if it's marijuana, if it's another drug, anything I smoke will decrease my endurance capacity by up to 6 to 10%. Now that's dramatic, especially if I rely on my motor to go over time. Okay. The last little thing we'll say with marijuana common argument that's going to come up. Oh, well, it's legal in other states. It's legal in, let's say, Colorado or Oregon or wherever it may be. Great point. Great point. Your rebuttal to this is you live in Texas. It is illegal. You play for Baylor University. It is illegal. You play in the Big 12 conference. It is illegal. And finally, you play in the NCAA. It is illegal. That is the only stance that we'll take on that at this moment. Okay, and that goes for kind of everything that we're kind of talking about with marijuana. There's no argument, regardless of what some of our athletes will come up with at this point. The biggest thing you need to continue to say is, at the current moment, regardless of where it is illegal and where it is not, it is illegal right now for you. The next one we'll talk about is opioids. So opioids are extremely addictive substances, and they're derived from opium poppies. Okay? What they do over time is alter sense of reality and really distort our sense of perception, and it really takes us out of our entire body. Okay, so we have a couple of different classes of opiates, okay, or opioids. Okay, we have natural, we have semi-synthetics, and then we have synthetics. Okay. None of these, unless they are prescribed and used correctly, are going to be safer or less safe than another. Okay, so things such as morphine, codeine, they're common meds for pain. They're common meds that will dampen the sensation of pain following a surgery. Okay, then we have things that are semi-synthetic. So things that may be a little bit even more addictive, more dramatic when used, especially if used incorrectly, or especially if used when you don't need them. Things like hydrocodone, okay, oxycodone, okay, things like that are going to be extremely addictive, and we don't know how our body's going to react to it. It is one thing if, let's say, I have knee surgery, I have hip surgery, back surgery, whatever, and I'm prescribed a medication, and they say, take this one time a day at this time for 7 days, and then throw the empty thing away. That is how medicine is supposed to be used. It is supposed to be used prescribed by a medical doctor and then used in completion based on their rules and what they tell you. It is not to be stopped halfway, save the rest for another day. It is certainly not like, hey, I had that same pain in my back. Here, try one of these. Okay, that's wrong. Okay, prescription medication, which a lot of opioids are inside of prescription medicines, are some of the most addictive types of drugs there are. They're some of the most dangerous as well. We'll come back to this slide. Well, let's go right here. If you look at synthetic opioids and other methadone, okay, which are very common in prescription medicines, look at the common death rate from overdose. Okay, if you just look at things like cocaine, heroin, which are the heroin and this other synthetic opioids, you can see that some of their deaths over time from 2000 to 2016, it's dramatic, right? 15,000, 14,000. That's super high. But look at synthetic opioids and other methadone. You're like 20,000 deaths, whereas cocaine is half of that. Okay, so great example here. You can see how much that these drugs can impact people, especially like when not used according to what's on the prescription. Let's go back here. So with opioids, some short-term effects, you're going to have some drowsiness, slowed breathing, and low-level unconsciousness. Okay, very similar to some of our depressant ideas that we were talking about a minute. The issue there is we don't know how much is in, especially a prescription medicine, if used incorrectly. We don't know how my body's going to impact it, especially if used with another substance. Okay, how much do I weigh? What have I had on my stomach? All these things are going to go into these short-term things. Anytime I'm thinking about something that's going to alter my mind state or put me in a low-level unconscious or deep unconscious state, we're talking serious issues here. So this needs to be really brought up. Long-term effects with using opioids, whether it's prescription or whether it's not, over long-term nausea, vomiting, just stomach irritability. Okay, I may have long-term liver damage, irreversible liver damage at that. I can have brain damage due to lack of oxygen. So as I go into a little bit of an unconscious state, I can slow my breathing down, slow my ventilation down. I just don't have as much oxygen coming in. Well, that damages the brain. Okay, that hypoxic environment is not what the brain needs. And when my brain goes into a hypoxic environment, it actually secretes certain things, toxic things inside my body, just so it can survive for the period of time. But those can really, increase my overall aging process. It can really be really bad for metabolism, and it can change my ability to think and reason. Okay, tolerance. Okay, over time we're going to develop a tolerance. Okay, so the same dosage may not elicit the same effects is because I'm getting used to it. Okay, so just like when we're training in the weight room, I can't just stay at 100 pounds for my entire career. I need to gradually get up because I've developed a tolerance and it doesn't produce any effect. Same thing with drugs, especially opioids. I may have to increase the level, the intensity, the volume of this drug in order to get the same effect. If I increase intensity and volume and I don't really know what's in it in the first place, nothing good can happen. Okay, and then dependency. Okay, once dependency sets in, it's really hard to get off without withdrawal symptoms. We already kind of talked about how dangerous they are. Okay, heroin, great thing here too. Most heroin users, any opioid users, oftentimes that's not the only drug that they're using. You can see here people who are addicted to heroin, which is an opioid, okay, are 2 times more likely. I'm sorry, flip this. People that use alcohol are 2 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. It goes all the way up to opioid painkillers. People that use prescription opioid painkillers are 40 times more likely to move toward and become addicted to heroin. Okay, so you can see how these things kind of lead into one another. All right, so wrapping this up here, this slide here where people use different things to at the same time leads right into the theory of a gateway drug. Okay, so a gateway drug's definition is basically any type of drug that basically breaks down the barriers or walls or maybe inhibitions for me to use another drug. Okay, so one of the things may be like alcohol. Let's say maybe I never in my life dreamed of smoking weed, but because I was okay with drinking some alcohol and I was down at the bar, I run into some dudes and we have a great conversation. Maybe it's super benign and innocent. Maybe we're just kind of talking, we're from the same area, we have similar interests and we're just having a great time having a couple beers and they're like, hey man, I got a joint. You want to go with us to smoke? And because my inhibitions had been lowered from the alcohol, I may change my perception or may make a wrong decision because everything is in choice and I may choose to go smoke. Okay, let's think about it even harder. Let's say I get to the point, so alcohol I can get anywhere. It's legal, right? If used correctly, it's legal. Marijuana is not. Let's say, where do I need to go to get the marijuana? Probably not anywhere nice. Okay, so let's say I have to go to a risky setting to get the marijuana. Or where do I go to get my cocaine? I have to go to a little bit more of a risky position. Okay, so when I go to the risky situation, the likelihood of me encountering other risky situations are heightened. Okay, so I need to be really careful there. That's a major thing. So one drug can break down the barriers for me to use another drug, but the risky situation also leads to more risky situations. Okay. So common use, going to this overall, the gateway drug theory, when we think about common stages of drug use, this plays right into it. So oftentimes we start with no use and then the first thing is alcohol. With alcohol, just like our example at the bar, may come marijuana use. After marijuana use, it can branch off into a lot of different things. I can go into using a lot of different types of drugs, from stimulants, depressants, to opioids, to prescription medicines. And then over time, it just is a drastic compounding effect where I just cannot even turn back. And I may be using multiple types of substances. I may be engaging in other immoral behavior in order to fund that drug enterprise. I could be dealing. I could be just getting involved in things that I did not ever intend to. Okay, so going back to the dice, and this will be kind of one of the last things we can talk about to summarize everything, but everything is about choice. Everything is about choice, and everything is about accumulating success over time. We want to work to find 1% every single day. Okay. By that, we can look at it in a binary system. So up at the top, you see ones and zeros. If I think about a year and I grade myself, how are my choices today? And I only gave myself a 1 or a 0. There's no gray area whatsoever. I can look to stack up wins. Think about it as choice. I'm confronted with a choice. Hey, man, you want to smoke a joint? The choice is either yes or no. I can get a 1 positive choice or I get a 0 negative choice. And those stack up over time. And when we're thinking athletic performance, we want to stack ones. We have to stack ones. Okay? Then the last thing, when we do stack our ones, we need to also remember that that's the past. The choices I make now today and tomorrow and the next day will impact what I did in the past. So let's say I have a bunch of ones and then I throw up a fat 0 because I made a really, really poor decision or found myself in a really bad situation. That can dramatically impact and erase all those other ones for me and for people on my team. Okay. So with this presentation, we went 45 minutes here. But again, this is just a coach's packet where we can kind of talk a little bit. One thing I would like you to do as we're delivering this is let's spend some time just making it your own. Move slides around, provide examples, personal experiences, do what you need to do to deliver this content to your athletes. But we want to root everything in choice. We want to make sure that they know that it's not the drug, but it's the choice to use the drug that we're really trying to attack and improve here. Okay? All right. Thanks a lot.